Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Southern Visions podcast webinar. My name is Joshua Vincent. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Vision Alliance, and I'll be moderating today's topic, Internationalism, Black Liberation, Cuba, and MLK's Legacy. I'm really excited to have a few special guests on today to talk with us about the topic, both Gail Walker from IFCO and Wesley Morris, who's Associate Director at SVA and a part of the Venceremos Brigade. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to give a little bit of context about what the podcast series and webinar series is actually about, what we're looking to do, and how we're going to continue moving forward for the rest of the year. This is one part or the first part of a 12-part series. We'll be doing these once a month for the next 12 months, highlighting specifically work and highlighting movement happenings in the South to help generate discussion, cross-collaboration, and peer-to-peer exchanges, and create a space for dialogue and exchanges of best practices and strategies and alignment for organizations and individuals looking to shake up things in the South and be aligned in community with each other politically. For the next couple of months, just to give you a quick snapshot of what we got coming up, we'll be next month highlighting Black workers in the South through kind of the Southern Workers Assembly and an Amazon struggle, highlighting workers' rights. In March, we'll be talking about women's rights, International Working Women's Day. We'll be talking to some political prisoners, highlighting political prisoners and immigrant refugees' rights. And in April, we'll also be celebrating the anniversary of Black Workers for Justice. And so just a quick snapshot of a little bit of the work that we'll be putting in over the next couple of months for the webinar series that we're doing now. So just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we jump into the whole process here. If you are in the chat, please make sure that you are clicking everyone when we're talking and introducing each other in the chat so that everyone can kind of see what's happening. It's easy to select hosts and panelists, but if you click that, you'll only send messages to the hosts and the panelists. So make sure you're clicking everyone in the chat. We're also having this discussion on all of our social media platforms. It's being live streamed across our Twitter and Facebook as well. We'll be using the hashtags for this discussion, hashtag MLK Day, hashtag Southern Vision, hashtag Let Cuba Live, and hashtag End the Blockade. And so this is just kind of a couple quick housekeeping things so folks know how to stay in contact with us. We'll be dropping our Twitter handles on here as well for folks to be able to continue the conversation online with us even afterwards and during this, so we can continue to dialogue and continue to chat about liberation, our liberation movement, our march towards liberation. So this is MLK Week. The context for this webinar is internationalism, Black liberation, Cuba, and MLK's legacy. Extremely excited again to say that we have both Gail Walker from IFCO and Wesley. And later in this podcast, we'll also be joined by some folks who are Caravanistas from North Carolina and South Carolina who were part of a trip, a recent trip to Cuba, the most recent trip to Cuba. And we'll be talking to them a little bit later about their reflections and their particular experiences. And so I want to go ahead and get into it. Wesley and Gail, when I invite them on to say a quick hello to the crowd, and then we'll show a quick video to move into our discussion.
Well, I'll just jump in and just say thank you, Joshua. And it's an honor to be here, and I'm pleased to be able to share this digital platform with such wonderful folk. Pastor Wesley, we haven't connected in a while, but I'm happy to see you. And of course, all the wonderful, beautiful people of Southern Vision Alliance that participated in this last summer's Caravan. So I'm excited to be here and to be a part of the conversation. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I am pumped and excited to be here with you. And this is just an awesome honor to share the stage with you, Gail, as well. And I'm really thankful for this taking place. I think the exchange of experiences, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding can only help us build towards a better freedom. And so thank you for this. I'm really excited. So if I bubble up and bubble over, just go ahead and expect that. This is an important conversation. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. So we'll get ready to show a quick video. Let's go ahead and get into it. How does MLK's legacy connect to U.S. foreign policy towards Cuba? We'll kick it off for a quick short video, and then we'll jump into our conversation.
Was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack it as such. Perhaps a more tragic recognition of reality took place when it became clear to me that the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. It was sending their sons and their brothers and their husbands to fight and to die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. We were taking the black young men who had been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Holland. And so we have been repeatedly faced with the cruel irony of watching Negro and white boys on TV screens as they kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them together in the same schools. And so we watch them in brutal solidarity, burning the huts of a poor village, but we realize that they would hardly live on the same block in Chicago. I could not be silent in the face of such cruel manipulation of the poor. My third reason moves to an even deeper level of awareness, for it grows out of my experience in the ghettos of the North over the last 3 years, especially the last 3 summers. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent.
All right. So just before we jump in, I want to do a little bit of framing for this first question for both Wesley and Gail. Both of you, with your backgrounds related to organizations that are faith-based, thinking in regard to the Black liberation theology orientation, and the relationship that it plays with our particular understanding of King now. How does this relate to the struggle for liberation and the revolutionary movement and the revolution that happened in Cuba? Gail, I'd love to get some start with you to get some feedback.
Yeah, well, thank you, Joshua, and thank you again for this this wonderful platform to have this conversation. There's so many different ways to approach that, I think, but certainly when we really look at what liberation theology at its base, at its root, has been to take the word, the gospel, and to really reflect on how we express it in a manner that's providing for that kind of support of the people for liberation. it makes sense when you look at the revolutionary process that Cuba has been engaged in, because I really, it's been said before, don't see a contradiction between the revolutionary fervor, that Fidel Castro and so many others that marched with him to construct the revolution. No contradiction between that and faith. I think that, that there is really a belief in supporting the rights of the people. Prior to the revolution in Cuba, there was, rampant health disparities, economic disparities. People were, dying from curable diseases. The revolution really transformed life for the vast majority of people in Cuba. And there's no difference for me between that kind of result and what, if you're looking at it from a Christian perspective, certainly that the gospel of Jesus really taught us and has persuaded us to the road to walk, that road of walking. So I see very much of a linkage, and I think that that's why there's really been so many different ways in which the Caravan and the delegations and the brigades that have been organized have really tried to focus in on looking at what is right and justice, and making a connection on that basis for a faith-based organization. It was a natural link. So I know that's a long meandering pathway, but I definitely see, very much of a kindred spirits there. And that's why I think there's so much support within the most faith communities when it comes to lifting the blockade and being in support of our Cuban family.
Yeah, I'll follow up and just share that there are many entry points for anyone to commit their life to a life of making a difference. And in this instance, we're talking about revolutionary change, which is political, it's social, it's cultural, and at so many levels. I agree with Gail that there are no contradictions between the basis of my faith and the practice of revolutionary change. In fact, the announcement of scripture in the gospel of Jesus is that the Spirit of the Lord is upon him because he's anointed to proclaim good news to poor people. And the translation of that poor are people who have been made poor by systems of domination, been sent to proclaim freedom to prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind and to set oppressed people free, and to proclaim a year of liberation or jubilee, as it is described. And so while that is something that animates me and gets me up, it might be different for someone else, but as much as a kindred spirit sees a society such as this, as Dr. King was naming, and talking about it's a time to break silence, we see how that has been distorted in the present day. Dr. King's words have been used actually to silence and to repress by the system of domination. So it's important to take the kernel of power and good of that life to lift that back up for the present day. And the same is true for the gospel and for any other religion, and so it's interfaith, it's interreligion, and those that do not practice religion. I can sit in the same room with you and agree with you that we have to continue to fight for revolution and revolutionary change. And in the spirit of Cuba, it is a very particular. And I think Dr. King announced that in his 1967 speech when he named that Cuba was a revolution that happened and changed because of the material conditions, the concrete conditions of that society. And so my faith, as much as the Exodus testimony, is I can go down, there's a thread for me there. It means as much to me as developing friendship and solidarity in the present day.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I just want to say this really quickly. When I heard Dr. King's that snippet and then got right into it, I was extremely excited to kind of jump into this conversation. And I wanted to take a moment just to pause to kind of give folks that are watching a little bit of context about who's actually on the line with us. And so, Gail, I'm going to read Gail's bio and Wesley's bio for y'all so we can get an understanding of their backgrounds and what they're coming to this, the framework that they're coming to this with. Gail Walker has worked with IFCO from 1987 to 2002 as the communications director and co-led the 1988 IFCO delegation to Nicaragua that resulted in the formation of the Pastors for Peace Project. Through Pastors for Peace, citizens are offered the opportunity to enact an alternative people-to-people foreign policy rooted in justice and mutual respect. During her early years at IFCO, she led a number of delegations to Central America and Cuba and staffed a number of Cuba friendship caravans. After years of working as a journalist and communications professional in print, video, and radio, Gail returned to IFCO as a director in 2011. Under her direction, IFCO staff have organized several Cuba friendship caravans and educational delegations to Cuba. IFCO has also continued to facilitate the process of dozens of US students to study medicine in Cuba under full scholarship and to expand the support for grassroots organizations working for social justice. And a little bit about Wesley. Wesley is a dedicated coach, facilitator, community organizer, a minister, and internationally recognized thought leader who used his dynamic speaking talents to inspire all who have the opportunity to hear his voice. His work for more than a decade with the beloved Community Center of Greensboro, home of the nation's first community truth and reconciliation process, uniquely positions him to guide those interested in intergenerational learning, historical archiving, and community organizing. Wesley is a graduate of North Carolina Agricultural Tech State University and Union Theological Seminary. And I'm just going to say that I'm a graduate of North Carolina Central, so we just put that in there. In high pressure situations, he pulls from his formal training and practical experience to unlock clarity for those who are seeking to change the world we live in. Wesley is the senior pastor of Faith Community Church in Greensboro. When asked about his call to ministry, Wesley emphatically says, "I'm here to drive strategic community building and influence transformative justice movements for all people." Also a member of the Dream Catchers Network, he uses his experiences to build those who are seeking to adjust or reinvent their self-identity. And so just a little bit about their backgrounds. We're going to jump right back into this conversation here because it's very important. It's a very critical conversation, especially given the time that we're in. I want to go ahead and just kind of start with a few kind of questions here. As a Black organizer, Wesley, as a Black organizer living in the South, how do you think about connecting Martin Luther King's legacy to the Cuba's experiment in socialism?
That's a great question. It pulls together a few ways that I show up in the world. One, my understanding of Dr. King as having so many ways that he showed up, but at his core, a man of faith, a practitioner of nonviolent disruption of society, and one that had a view and a vision of the beloved community. And then secondly, he's from Georgia. And so I have my roots in Georgia as well. And am reminded that there is a particular culture that grows out of this milieu of the South and the different migrations that happen to create this culture. And it connects with what I would name as my first lesson when I went to Cuba with the Venceremos Brigade back in the early 2010s. And we were talking with a community gardener, and he was talking about providing food for his community. And we had an opportunity to ask questions just like one you asked. And we said, how did the revolution happen? How did it change? As if he was going to be able to tell us in 1 minute. But what I learned in that moment, we were expecting maybe some military strategy being discussed, or some logistics, or maybe some economic principles that they engaged or questions. He simply said friendship and solidarity. And when I heard that, something clicked in my spirit and said that if it's friendship and solidarity, then that means I need to have a certain kind of familiarity, kindredness with those who are seeking a new world and a new society. And then not only that, I need to be ready, willing, and able to act on that friendship and that kindredness. And so being from the South, I think that one, there's a song lyric that comes to mind. It says that there are places in Havana that remind me of Savannah. And it's a reminder that there are places here in the community and neighborhoods that will remind you of the capital of Cuba. and saying that there are these similarities, there are these ways in which the way of life here, the way of being is similar to that. They don't make different human beings because we're born in different places. We have different cultures, different beliefs. But I will say that the same kind of changes that we're seeking in terms of access to education and healthcare, having a staunch position of being anti-capitalist, anti-empire, then that is a way forward when we build our friendship and solidarity on that. We can have logistics, you can have analysis, but if we don't have a way of connecting with each other at a deeply collective and personal level and being able to overcome conflicts and disagreements, then there's a challenge to form the kind of revolutionary bond needed to create that change.
Wow, incredible. A lot of that resonates with me. I've been to Cuba twice and experienced it as a young college student studying revolution in Cuba in particular. There was a way that I kind of thought about revolution in Cuba, romanticized it, right? And when I got there, the first thing I realized was that it was that I connected immediately with the people in that kind of vein of solidarity. And so, Gail, I really would love to hear from you a little bit about your perspective on, this orientation, this idea that, folks a lot of times romanticize what revolution looked like. What does revolution look like in Cuba, and how has it changed over the last 60 plus years?
Yeah. Well, very astute, point that things do evolve over time. We're here talking about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King. Well, he's certainly somebody that we can look to as a person whose thoughts and beliefs and expression of those beliefs varied over time. I mean, there was really an evolution, and I think that that's natural with most people, and it's certainly been the case as well. I think with the Cuban Revolution, there have been, it's a process. There's no doubt about that, and and there's also no doubt that Cuba is not really where it was 60 years ago. There's been so many changes that have kind of evoked and come up. But one of the things that I think is important to highlight is the way in which Cuba has really made an effort to try to address, issues as they come. So whether they're talking about the rights of LGBT folk and all of what that engages, whether they're talking about the issue of race, which has been, really at the forefront in this latter period of time. There's been, a lot of criticisms made of Cuba over the years, claims of a lack of freedoms of expression, of religion. It's kind of the same, I think, in many ways, the same narrative. And I think what's interesting though is that Cuba, I think, has really worked to try to figure out, aside from dismissing the noise, the rhetoric, the negativity that gets expressed about Cuba. Aside from that, I think it's a nation that's looking inward and saying, there are things that we can and need to address, and that they've been able to do that over time. There's no doubt in its early stages, the revolution, there were people of faith and people who were HIV positive, people that were in the LGBTQ community were not embraced fully into the family. There were camps. There was definitely a separation when it came to how they would be a part of the revolutionary experience. But that is something that I think Cuba has grown and adopted and been able to recognize and to engage in conversations nationwide. I mean, across the country. Case in point, I mean, I'm jumping kind of all over the place a little bit, Josh, so you might need to rein me in, but I just wanted to talk just really quickly about this family code that's taking place. There's this real effort to talk about what does life look like in Cuba for across the board, and it's an opportunity. I think one of the things that I find really fascinating is it's an opportunity for the people to engage in conversation. A nationwide conversation about how we look at our Constitution and the rights of our people. it's unheard of, like certainly here in the United States and our experience. And that's one of the things I think that people really resonate to. They're like, wow, it is possible to engage the people who are being impacted by the particular system that they live under, for them to have a say and to have the abilities to speak out. So there's so many different ways I think that Cuba has over these past 60 years evolved, changed. I think it will continue to do so. I'll just end by saying, we often say Cuba's not perfect, and no one is claiming that, but it shouldn't be put to a higher standard than anyone else. That's where where the contradiction comes in, and the hypocrisy, and that's part of, I think, the work that those of us who had been to Cuba need to be able to point to and lift up and, continue that. But Wesley, you've had, this is.
I'm pumped up. I'm right with you. I'm bouncing in my chair.
I see you.
No, it brings me to when I heard a phrase. I was at the U.S. World Social Forum back, I think, in 2008 or 2009, and it talked about another world is happening, or another world is possible. And then it followed up with another world is happening. And I began to think about the ideas that are generated in a culture that is revolutionary. Because we're not talking about just changing positions, getting a different mayor or getting a different police chief, getting a different president. We're talking about developing a whole culture which includes everyone, artists, masons, architects. It develops from the internality of the person that is freed from the bondage of a system of domination that would rather repress the human experience, repress the human spirit, and exploit it for the use of the system. And so anytime that happens, I get to start thinking about these points. That one, what is a penetrating question that happens for me in my local community that's running a program? How does that add to a revolutionary culture? And so I start thinking about the literary programs in the early turn of the revolution that address not only illiteracy in young people, but also adults, and also bridge the gap between those that are teaching at the countryside from those in the city. And so it is a way of developing your programs that you're working here, because I know that there's going to be questions, well, what do I do? Or where do we go from here? As the fundamental question that Dr. King asked in his latter years of 67 and 68. It starts with having a good analysis of where we are, and then developing those programs that address where we want to be. So who has the idea now that creates a world that is not only possible, but is happening? And so that it actually inspires you where you are to not only connect for the purpose of your community or your neighborhood, but you then broaden it out to this conversation of internationalism and realize that the solidarity goes beyond only acknowledging that a revolution happened, but being a part of it in your visionary work wherever you are today, leading an organization, being in friendships, however you design life. It's like, how do you take those principles that guided a whole country to change and to kick out folks who were exploiting and dominating them and using them and not honoring the human spirit, and transitioning to a culture that honors freedom, justice, and human dignity? Because your dignity will speak up for you if you're being repressed. Your dignity will speak up for you, for your neighbor, if they're being hurt or harmed by systems of domination and exploited. So this is a culture that I've learned from the Beloved Community Center, from Venceremos, and from my faith, which ultimately holds a goal of creating a new world and a new society.
Woo, this is striking a chord in me, and I know when we talked earlier this week on the prep call, I said we're not going to have enough time. It's going to move faster, but I do want to take a couple more minutes, and maybe we can keep this this part kind of short. We are going to have a question and answer section towards the end of this, so we'll be able to kind of dive into a little bit more of the topics too. But I did want to kind of bring this kind of full circle. And thinking about the legacy of Dr. King and what he, at the end of his life, was working on in terms of the Poor People's Campaign and the orientation towards the working class and the redistribution of economic wealth, and tying economics and wealth in this country, tying that into the kind of the blueprint or DNA of the revolution in Cuba, and also other successful revolutions around the world that we look to for inspiration. What are some of the key kind of maybe top line parallels that both of you all, Gail and Wesley, see and that are in direct alignment or direct relationship with Dr. King's vision towards the later part of his life?
Yeah, you're speaking about just the legacy of King and the ways in which that kind of shows up or kind of gets manifested.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different examples of that as well. I mean, I'll just be self-serving and talk a little bit about IFCO and the fact that we organize these caravans to take, not only to take humanitarian aid, but really the important thing is to educate people about Cuba, stopping in different communities, educating people about the reality there, and collecting aid as a symbol of and a gesture of friendship and solidarity, and as an example of what the government, the U.S. government, ought to be doing in its relations with Cuba. So, but that doing that work, and particularly in the earlier years where there was a lot of confrontation, whether it was with the border officials, border guard officials, or it was Alpha 66 trying to run vehicles off the road. I mean, there were violence acts that we were engaged in, and but it was under the the belief that as people of faith and people of conscience, as to Wesley's point, we come from many different circles, and our only concern is that if we can be thinking and focused in the same light and lifting up justice for Cuba, that we're in sync. But the work to do this was really in many ways inspired by King's commitment to nonviolence. We can have a whole conversation about violence and when it might be appropriate, when it might not be, and I mean there needs to be room, I think, for that conversation. But that was certainly something that helped to inspire the work of IFCO Pastors for Peace. My father, Reverend Lucius Walker, who was certainly a believer and a follower of King. And we've been able to successfully use that civil disobedience to break unjust and immoral laws, like the shameful blockade of Cuba. So that's certainly one. The importance of, I think, linking faith to social justice and not allowing fundamentalists and right-wing, folk to control the narrative about what it means to be a people of faith, faithful to our beliefs. To be, as we were just discussing, to be a real, and we've used this term quite often at IFCO, to be a real revolutionary by practicing your faith. So there's certainly that. And then I'll just end by saying that Martin Luther King Center in Havana, looking for inspiration, fell upon the teachings of King and elected to name its center after him because of the beliefs and what it was that Martin Luther King stood for. And resonated with. So there's just a couple of examples, I think, of ways in which the teachings, the beliefs of King come forward. And of course, as I said, it helps to shine a spotlight on what it means to be evolving in your thinking. And that's something I think we all do as we grow and we develop. We evolve in our thought. And it's really a clinic to watch Dr. King, that arc and where he was just prior to his death, just the radical King. And it's something that, of course, we're called on to lift up whenever we talk about him, so that we're not dealing with that sanitized version that, too often people want to paint on Dr. King.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Wesley, really quickly, and then we'll move on to the next section here.
Yeah, I'll move quickly. This is, you covered a lot, Gail, and I want to just say out loud, I thank you for your work and the decades and the legacy that you carry within you. And just personally for me, the legacy is on the points of unity, these principled discussions of saying, where do we agree? There's going to be lots of narratives, there'll be plenty of perspectives, but what do we agree? We think that, and I know that there's an illegal US military occupation of Guantanamo Bay. And to be able to be clear about militarism and why Dr. King named that as one of the triplets of evil. When we see a budget that is expanding every year and a decline in social budgets for care of people, what do those dollars do? It's not only naming the amount, but understanding that they have an effect somewhere else in the world. I think Walter Rodney's work on how Europe underdeveloped Africa is a wonderful text. It's powerful in its analysis of the capitalist system and the actual materials and down to a granular sense of the effects of colonial masters and banking systems. All of that is important. We want to end the blockade against Cuba. Every country has the right to self-determination, a self-determination that does not infringe upon that of the next or the neighbor. And I think that one thing that I'll share, because I know we're short on time, is that we advocated strongly for the release of the Cuban 5 political prisoners being held here. And this is a story of triumph. We need more stories of triumph where we are able to name that we fought for something. And I remember my first visit to Cuba that we named that we, free the Cuban 5, and that was important. And you can research that. And then the next time I went, they were free. And we were meeting with their family. We were meeting with their relatives. We were being able to hear them. And that gave me so much joy. And we celebrated in the Martin Luther King Jr. Center in Cuba. And I think that power says that there's people power that remember and have those kind of memories. You don't have to remember their memories, keep on remembering mine. That's what Lucille Clifton says. And so it's powerful when people remember. And all of us, it's in our body. There's a dangerous memory that lies right under the surface for all of us. We remember the atrocities that have happened, but also the successes of people that work together.
Fantastic. Thank y'all both so much for this very, very incredible conversation. This has been food for my soul, I know. And I'm looking forward to continuing these kinds of conversations going forward for sure. We're gonna move to our next section here of the webinar. We are not done. Manzoor Chima, our development director, is gonna come on and bring us a little quiz, and then we'll move into another section from a report back from folks that went on the trip to Cuba.
Yeah, hi, greetings everyone. This is an exciting conversation. Once again, my name is Manzoor Chima. I'm excited to have joined SVA team recently, and I'm also a member of Muslims for Social Justice. This is an incredible conversation about internationalism, Cuba, and MLK legacy. So thank you so much. So what we taught in this webinar is also have some quiz and engagement with participants. Thank you so first of all for folks for adding their questions. Please add them in the question or the chat section, and we'll get back to them at the end of the webinar. But now I will ask Ben to maybe start the question. So I'll narrate the questions for folks too. There's probably some on the phone too. And I apologize for technology if not everybody can respond to it, but I'll at least narrate the question and the results. So in which of these countries has the CIA overthrown a democratically elected government? And the choices are Iran, Guatemala, Indonesia, Congo, and Chile. So please, submit your choices. We'll get to the answers maybe in 20-30 seconds after you have a chance to answer these questions. And the second question is, which country has the highest infant mortality? And when I say highest means is the worst, which means highest number of infant deaths, per 1,000 live births. And the options for that question are Cuba, Singapore, USA, Greece, and Norway. So what we'll do, we'll give you a chance for maybe another, 10-20 seconds to give your answers, and then we will give you our answer, and as well as what the folks have given the answer. So I'm also going to look at how I can see the answers. So as I mentioned, we are just closing it now. So we will get the answers now. Just let me see, where is the window for the answers? Okay, so that's great. We actually, and again, we are just testing this poll, so sorry if it's not the most clear. So actually, we saw answers, people saying all of those 5 countries have witnessed a CIA coup. These are all democratically elected governments that US CIA orchestrated a coup against those countries: Iran, Guatemala, Indonesia, Congo, and Chile. And it's very relevant in the context of all the conversation going on about foreign governments meddling in US elections. The US has a history, much longer history of interference around the world, which we will go through slides. And secondly, which country has the highest infant mortality? This is great. Majority of the people, 90% say it's USA. USA has the highest or the worst track record in the infant mortality and healthcare in the developed world, as well as in many of the so-called developing world. We fare far worse. So these are, we thought to indicate, and I think we have 2 slides if we can put them on, and otherwise we can move to the next section. But I think this is pretty much good. Thank you so much. I thought it would be good to engage folks, and thank you so much everyone for joining in, and we'll move to the next section. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manzoor. Thank you so much. I want to take a second to pass it back over to Gail really quickly to introduce a short video on IFCO, IFCO's experience in Cuba. Gail, do you want to maybe set the video up, and then we'll get it shared so folks can check out a little bit of see a little bit what's going on.
Yeah, I believe this is a video that, or maybe a short series of videos that was produced during the Caravan. We were fortunate to have a lot of young people with just talented, smart, and folk who could capture different aspects of what it meant to be in Cuba, and how we were able to experience learning about women and the rights of LGBTQ, and of course hearing about the expression of freedom of religion, some of the churches that we were able to visit. So I think that's the video that you're referring to. I apologize, Joshua, I didn't.
It's actually the video that was put together for International Human Rights Day that went to the UN.
Thank you, Elena. Sorry. Okay, let me just back up again. Same talented group of young people who had participated on the Caravan, who were asked to just basically say, what does human rights look like to me? And we wanted to be able to use this to share on Human Rights Day. The UN's Day of Human Rights is December 10th, but it was also the same day that the Biden administration had determined that they were going to hold a summit on democracy and invite the world to attend. But of course, there were certain nations that were never received their invitation. And you can imagine that Cuba, and Venezuela, and Nicaragua, and others like that were on the list. But this was a video that was formulated sort of in response to that, but to, again, express our viewpoint about here's what human rights really looks like. So thank you, Elena, for that nod.
We are targeted because we are Black or brown or migrant. We are targeted because we are queer or trans. In this context, I know that human rights is not just the absence of injustice, it's also the presence of basic human needs like healthcare, housing, and education. It's the presence of a society that has organized its political, social, and economic system around prioritizing human life and not profit. And most of all, human rights to me means the presence of love and solidarity, of genuine friendship and belonging. These are the things that are entitled to all of us, and not just the ones who can afford it.
If we want to talk about democracy, if we want to talk about women's liberation, we need to look to countries like Cuba, where there is participatory democracy, where there is a family code, and where women's liberation is something that's being protected by the government.
The United States of America is one of the globe's major violators of human rights. As the United States leads the global capitalist system during a pandemic, it continues to expose in greater detail how its own economic and social inequalities for generations have been endured by the Black community. Black people are dying nearly at 1.5 times the rate of white America. The United States healthcare system is antithetical to human rights. It's an unregulated model that puts profits over the needs of its people. An unregulated U.S. capitalist economy leads to diminishing the quality of life from generation to generation. The Biden-Harris administration should spend more time making the United States a more democratic society by dealing with its own racist and fascistic tendencies. If the United States focuses more openly and transparently on its own domestic issues, as the U.S. Constitution puts it, quote, to form a more perfect union, end of quote, and let other nations pursue their own rights to sovereignty, that is fundamental democracy.
When I think of human rights, the first thing that comes to mind for me is your human right to protect yourself against capitalist oppression, right? Like your literal human right to decide that you won't allow yourself, the people you love, or the rest of humanity to be destroyed by capitalist domination. At the U.S. Summit on Democracy, while the U.S. Conveniently tries to persecute other nations for what it considers human rights violations, there are a few names that are definitely going to go flying under the radar. They are the names of some of the Black political prisoners in the U.S. who have given their lives fighting against this system. And so I'm going to say them here. Mumia Abu-Jamal, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, Reverend Joy Powell, Sundiata Akoli, Dr. Matulu Shakur, Joseph Bowen, Veronza Bowers, Kamal Siddiqui, Josh Williams, Russell Maroon Schultz, who was recently granted compassionate release after 50 years in prison, 22 of those in solitary confinement. They took his entire life away from him, released him on his deathbed, and called that compassion. And we see that that is a model that is going to be followed for the rest of our aging political prisoners as well. Last but not least, Dedan Waikuri, my friend who's 31 years old and being persecuted by Greenville, North Carolina for his participations in the George Floyd uprisings of 2020, because political prisoners in the United States are not just a thing of the past. We see that there is a concerted effort to create a new class, a new generation of political prisoners as well. These are the names of men and women who all woke up one day and realized that the phrase human rights has to mean more than just the ability for corporations to destroy human life for the purpose of profits, and they dedicated their lives to trying to do something about it. There's no human right more precious than the right to defend humanity against oppression, and in the U.S.
Great. Thank y'all so much. What a beautiful video. We'll share the link to that so folks can follow up and watch the rest of it. It's an amazing video, a lot of incredible insight. I want to take a moment now to create a space for our beloved Beau and Shaquille and Salifu to give us a bit of a report back from their experience going on the Caravan to Cuba back in November, and give a little bit of context and share some of the highlights and experience that they had. Let's see, can we bring Beau up and maybe help set it up? Hey, Beau.
Hello. Hey, it's so good to be here. My name is Beau Cromartie. I'm a part of the Southern Vision Alliance. And I was also part of the last Caravan to Cuba with Compa South. I'm here to speak today with Salifu and Shaquille from Low Country Action Committee, Black-led grassroots organization in South Carolina. And yeah, I want to give y'all a chance to introduce yourselves as well.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. So wonderful to be here. This has been an amazing program so far. I'm Shaquille Fontenot, and as Beau mentioned, I am a member of the Low Country Action Committee, and we're a Black-led grassroots organization dedicated to Black liberation through service and political education in the Low Country. Beau, do you want me to get into it, or Salifu, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, y'all, I'm Salifu. I'm a member of the Low Country Action Committee, which is all the things that Shaquille just said.
Awesome. So I'll just share a little bit about our experience on the Caravan. So we went on the 31st Friendship Caravan with IFCO. I had a chance to meet all the people that I've been organizing with virtually for a long time since we're still under a global plague. And I just had such an eye-opening, amazing experience and got to connect with so many wonderful people. And in Cuba, we had the opportunity to visit scientific and medical centers, educational centers, really eye-opening museums. We spoke with elected officials, artists, physicians, community leaders, gender equity experts, and cultural workers. And we got a chance to really see a comprehensive picture of what's really going on in Cuba. Because a tactic of imperialism, specifically US imperialism, is to water down the reality of the experience of the people. And this is usually done through vicious propaganda campaigns. And as Gail mentioned earlier, the US State Department will say there's no religious freedom, no artistic freedom, and this is the sanitization of the reality of the people. So I wanted to share a really, really quick video. Let me make sure I click share sound. And this is from our visit to Cabildo Casey Cabo, which is a nonprofit organization addressing the spiritual, cultural, and material needs of the people. So I'll go ahead and play this really quickly. So in that video, you can clearly see us dancing in the streets of Cuba. And this was definitely a direct antithesis to the narrative that we were being fed in the United States about the freedom and the just the ability of the people to express themselves in Cuba. And part of the socialist project in Cuba is a commitment to the care of the citizens of the nation. So the cultural center that we visited, they had rehabilitation services for those that have been formerly incarcerated. They had programs for children and adolescents prone to high-risk diseases. They had programs for families, for people that were hungry, whoever needed anything. The cultural centers in Cuba are just really a center of an extension of the socialist project. So I believe that connecting it back to MLK was a radical critic of racism, capitalism, imperialism, militarism. And as Wesley mentioned earlier, Dr. King even stated in the speech, the evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and racism. And the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. And a nation like the US that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. So the struggles against imperialism in Cuba are amplified by the support of other progressive governments around the world. And it's a commitment to the solidarity that has allowed the socialist project to be able to continue to develop over time, despite a US economic blockade, despite the propaganda war, despite a lack of access to resources. So isolation by the US has not stopped Cuba's support of other countries, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Palestine, the Philippines, Angola. So when we examine this, I would say to be cognizant of your contribution to the revolution, because it extends far beyond Cuba's borders. And I think that was the importance of our visit there, because I read so much about Cuba and the socialist project over the years, and being able to see it live and in action really solidified the fact that the revolution is possible here as well. So when I think Miriam Thompson asked in the chat, how can we intensify our work in exposing Cuba's human rights advancements compared to our own government's failure to do the same? Part of it is talking about it and showing these clips and having these discussions. And people will call you crazy and will try to water down your message. But at the end of the day, the truth will come to light. That's it for me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I wanted to also, ask similarly of Salifu, what was really impactful about our trip, and, anything you would like to share.
All right, greetings everyone. So just to pick up on Dr. King real quick, something that me and my comrades talk about often is that every year on MLK Day, there tends, or the week surrounding MLK Day, right? there tends to be this sort of like mad dash for all of us to run around and try to like reclaim MLK's legacy, and it almost forces us to kind of try to have to put him and force him into boxes, because we know how the empire works to kind of take him and sanitize him and use him against us. But I think objectively speaking, right, like when you take a look at Dr. King's life, two things that are objectively true about him is that Dr. King was constantly engaging in a rigorous process of criticism, self-criticism with himself. And he was not at all immune to being pushed on positions, stretched and grown, which are two very admirable qualities, I think, that so many of us should not only aspire to, but should be actively like participating in every day. Like every day, I think all people should be engaged in a process of self-criticism, because that is the only way that we kind of are able to develop a new person, a new being, like a new human. And so thinking about what it means to create a new person in itself, that is like that is a huge basis of revolution. Like there's the in Islam, and we talk about the jihad, and one of them is the jihad of self, the struggle within yourself, the internal struggle. But then when you talk about in a revolutionary sense, whether you're talking about the struggles that happen on the African continent, the Pan-African struggles, where Dr. Kwame Nkrumah theorizes about the revolutionary African personality, whether you talk about the new man or new woman in the Soviet Union, revolution is supposed to create a new person. It's supposed to create a person who is concerned with the well-being of humanity, who's concerned with the well-being of their neighbor, who is against imperialism, right? And being in Cuba, it was incredible for me to be able to see firsthand what a revolution does and what kind of person that it creates. I think no example illustrates that better than the example of the CDRs, the Committee for the Defense of the Revolution in Cuba, who in the United States, because you know imperialism lies all the time, they're always constantly trying to give you this image of this like scary communist. They're always lying on communists and communism and what that is, and you know, so many people died because of communism, like all these lies that they're constantly telling you. But then you go to Cuba and you realize that the people who are keeping the Cuban Revolution alive are everyday people. There's nothing scary about them. There's nothing intimidating about them. They're just like the little old ladies at your church. They're like your aunts. They're like your mom, right? They're these people who feel revolution deep in their hearts because they remember what life was like before it. And they've devoted their lives to every day improving and contributing to that process of revolution. The CDRs are the people who are making sure that even with the food shortages on the island that exist because of the blockade, people are eating every day. Nobody is starving. They're the people in the community who know who's had what vaccine, who might need to see a doctor to get this vaccine, what vaccine might be applicable for the people in this home, so on and so forth. And that is a process of caring, right? That's a process of being informed about your neighbor and wanting to ensure that any challenges being created by this blockade, which I would love to reiterate is a huge challenge on the island right now for the people. Even though Cuba has continued to innovate, like, don't get it twisted, it is a challenge that has to be defeated every day that people wake up. And so I felt like it was important for me to see that, because one thing that has to happen here in the United States is we cannot avoid a revolution of our own, right? Like, it's great to talk about Cuba's revolution and to talk about why it's important, but Cuba can't sustain worldwide revolution on their own. They need us here in the world core of the empire to get it cracking, to get busy. And so it's important for us to be able to see ourselves as ushers in the church, as Sunday school teachers, as people who work at Subway, McDonald's, who are truck drivers, who work at the gas station, to be able to see and envision yourself as a part of a revolution here in the United States as well.
Wow, thank you so much, both of you. Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. Her revolutionary process in Cuba has taught me so much as well. And it looks like some folks in the chat want to hear from y'all. even more. So we'll definitely share your contact information with folks later on. And speaking of this caravan, there's going to be another one in July. So I'm going to pass it over to Ajamu Dillahunt, one of the board members at IFCO, to talk more about the future caravans. Or Josh too, also, if you want to say a few words.
Cool. While we're waiting to hear back from Ajamu, I want to go ahead and kind of move us through to our question and answer Q&A section here of the agenda. Oh, we got Ajamu up. Sorry. Let's go ahead and pass it over to Ajamu. What's up, brother? How you doing?
What's up, brother? Doing well. It might be best if comrades checked in with Gail and others from IFCO on the call about the upcoming caravan, but I'm sure information can be found on IFCO's website. From my understanding, you know, I was supposed to share some comments about the webinar on BWFJ's 40th anniversary. Am I on the right track?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but please check in with Gail and the IFCO team. Visit the website and participate in the 32nd Friendshipment Caravan. I also participate in the 31st Friendshipment Caravan, and it was transformative and got to experience it with comrades in North Carolina. It's a life-changing experience, so I encourage everyone to participate. But as mentioned, this year is the 40th anniversary of Black Workers for Justice, an organization that was founded in 1982 in Fremont, North Carolina, which had its headquarters in Rocky Mount throughout its history. But Black Workers for Justice engaged in workplace struggles throughout the state of North Carolina and sought to organize the unorganized. But in the context of Dr. King, since its early years, Black Workers for Justice has held MLK Support for Labor banquet, demonstrating the interconnectedness between labor and the Black freedom struggle. And as part of some of these banquets, many of you on the call have participated in them. And in addition to Black Workers for Justice engaging in workplace struggles, they also connected issues in the workplace to questions of political power, to questions of environmental justice, and to questions of internationalism. BWFJ throughout its history has sent many Southern workers on delegations to Cuba, on delegations to Nicaragua, on delegations to different parts of the world where there was revolutionary struggle taking place and those opposing U.S. imperialism. And to put it in the context of this panel in Cuba, Black Workers for Justice has participated since 1992 or 93 in IFCO's friendshipment caravans throughout the country and has been supporters of IFCO and this work. And so we'll get to, on the webinar in April, celebrate Black Workers for Justice for their contribution. And to be honest, we can confidently say, if you want to understand the revolutionary movement in North Carolina in the 21st century, one has to understand the history of Black Workers for Justice, for their contributions to the workers' movement, but also the larger movement for social change. And one last thing, speaking of North Carolina, there's a student who will be participating in the ELAM program. And she's from Raleigh, North Carolina, native. So we have one of our own participating and going to be trained as a revolutionary doctor. Her name is Joyce, and more will come on who she is and her journey to ELAM through the program that IFCO, along with the Cuban government, coordinates. So thank you all. Looking forward to seeing you all in April, celebrating Black Workers for Justice. And thank you, Southern Vision Alliance.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ajamu, for sharing that information. We're looking forward to all the great work we're going to do going forward. And I'm going to go ahead now and pass it over to Manzoor to help walk us through or lead us through our question and answer section. We can bring Manzoor and the rest of the panelists up and we'll get started.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you. These are powerful presentations. Thank you all for excellent, brilliant presentations, very transformative experiences you shared with us. Please, if you have not typed your question in the chat section, you can also put it in Q&A section. And I will go with some questions that we just received. A question from Kim. Just want to know if you have insights on the increasing aggression by US imperialism to start a war with Russia and China right now. And anyone can take, Gail, Wesley, Josh.
I don't have a lot to contribute to that, frankly. I'm happy to hear anything any of the others might have to say.
Manzoor,
can
you repeat that question, Manzoor?
Sorry about that. So I will repeat it one more time. Gail wanted to know if you have an insight on the increasing aggression by US imperialism to start a war with Russia and China. And basically, the current mode of US military. And I will add one more thing to it. The US had the highest increase in military budget recently. And it's a bipartisan support, just to indicate the ongoing struggle that MLK mentioned more than 50 years ago about.
I actually don't have a whole lot of insight in particular that specifically talks like around specifically those two countries and that what's happening there. If we can maybe have a question that centers more closely aligned to the orientation with King and the Cuban Revolution, that'd be great.
Definitely. I will move forward to it, and folks can also type in the chat too. The other question, which is actually very relevant to a lot of discussion here, and it says, can revolutions move forward without communities of faith in support and solidarity to build liberation movement? And I feel like this is really connected to Gail and Wesley, the work you're doing of bringing the faith communities in this work.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly say that that's, definitely a audience constituency, a part of the network that we reach out to broadly. I mean, like I said, people of faith, people of conscience, but I think the importance of having all elements of society represented as we, struggle to, create whatever revolutionary kingdom we may be aiming to achieve, from big and small. Just as community organizing, it's as community organizers, it's important that we we reach out to the community and address and pull us all together. But I think that the faith community too often is overlooked as an ally. And I think it's about speaking to people's realities and not just asking for the church to show up at a particular event when there really hasn't been a relationship that's been established with the church about what the church is about. There's a level of reciprocity that I think is important, and sometimes that gets overlooked. But I think it's possible and absolutely correct that we pull all sectors of our diverse family together. Pastor.
Absolutely. A community is made up of many parts, and I got that from Shaquille and Salifu and Beau's presentation, that there are grocery stores, there are cleaners, well, there are churches, and that helps a lot of folks organize their lives. And sometimes families or chosen families are organized around a spiritual belief. And to be inclusive and be thoughtful about it, it is building relationships, because not every faith church is progressive. And in fact, it's a struggle within the faith itself to know and come back to itself. And so there's a deep level of writing and work and research and effort done to try to get a thread. Like we talked about liberation theology, there's books that will help, create an entry point for building a relationship. The Cross and the Lynching Tree by Dr. James Cone, God of the Oppressed, Sisters in the Wilderness by Dolores Williams. And so there are so many ways to approach womanist texts that deal with theology, Black liberation theology, and it's located in so many places. but not every faith community is there at that place. But you could build a relationship because people are people. I come back to that. And we need each other and we need to build those relationships. And there's a 3R rule. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. And oftentimes we're talking against each other and over each other, and that creates the rebellion that does not necessarily have to be there. If you build the right kind of relationship, we can joke, we can talk, we can go to places that we could never go if we didn't have a relationship, and kind of help us grow some power. Because I think that that's the goal of the question. How do you grow power? And if faith communities can add to that, then they need to be included.
Yeah, and at the table. I'm sorry, rules without relationships leads to rebellion.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to professor.
That's an old youth pastor lesson. Yeah.
I want to just tap on this because this is something that's been leaning on me for a while as a historian who's had a chance to look at, the enslavement in the United States, the history. If you know anything about chattel slavery in the United States, it's very unique that when African people who were enslaved were finally emancipated from slavery and allowed to organize themselves individually or independently religiously, the first things they did were name their churches, in some cases, the African Baptist Church, right? Which points to a socialization and a political orientation of an understanding of self-identity that continue to hang with people through centuries of enslavement, right? And I think that it's important to, especially as we talk about a Southern vision, we have to be very cognizant and aware of the relationship that revolutionary change has with spiritual foundation and religious organization, right? And what that means for our not only the way that we think about collective bodies of people, but how folks are collectively inspired to continue to move on in the midst and in the face of the gross amounts of oppression that our people face on a consistent basis. So I want to name that and say that there is a thread there, absolutely, and a kind of on my personal and also very orientation to a commitment to finding those blueprints and those threads to kind of pull on to as we see a resurgence of political movement across the South.
Yeah. I just would say, having had the opportunity to travel to Cuba with this last caravan, and so many with this great cadre of young activists right there from North Carolina, that was refreshing. I think that it was really, again, like information sharing, because it was an opportunity. IFCO was sort of the glue, but for bringing, folk together from different regions and organizations. And I think that kind of interconnecting is what is going to certainly benefit all of us as we try to build this new world that we are ultimately, on one way or another, trying to work towards. I just wanted to say, bringing it back to King, that the center in Havana is one of those places that provides those kinds of opportunities to bring the community together. And there are people on the caravan who witnessed people from the neighborhood coming through to get potable water, because the center is a place where they can do that, or get medicines, or to get food. And it was very much tied to that expression of doing, for the people. So it's the whole issue of faith and solidarity, I think, is so intertwined. And anytime people are able to be in Cuba to witness not only the reality that is Cuba, but the opportunity to hear the contradiction from the United States. And that happened on this last caravan. We were in a church, and at the same time, people were receiving notices that the US government, the State Department, had put Cuba on a list as countries that didn't allow for freedom of expression, freedom of religion. And here we were in a church, having service, learning about the work the church does in the community. And for the Caravanistas to see that, whether these were Caravanistas who have a relationship to church or not, but to see that contradiction, that's the powerful stuff that, I think we need to be able to share and really as a way to ultimately educate people about the blockade.
Definitely. I'm going to follow up with the time limited. One more question, if that's okay, and we will try to follow up with other questions through chat. But these are great answers. Thank you so much, Gail, Wesley, Josh. The other question from Miriam is in response to all the allegations of human rights abuses the USA makes against Cuba. What about the human rights abuses inside the United States? Inequality, poverty, oppression against, and I just am paraphrasing the question, which I think is really important and want to hear from you all.
I can start on that. Yeah, so I mean, that's an important question because it shows this sociological question of trying to deal with things further away from yourself than you are in your own self. And so it brings us to this point where we have to be very clear about what we are experiencing within the confines of this system, not just a person or, people are doing things to us, but we have to talk about the systems that create the conditions under which we live. And when you have a symbol and you're making Cuba into a symbol for all things bad, and I remember that, before I went for myself and before I began to do some reading and do some substantive research, I began to think like I had these reactions or I was provoked just by the mention of Cuba. Why? I had to start asking myself some questions about where are these ideas coming from and who do they benefit and who do they serve? And it also comes to me again in that question around my identity. If people are able to tell you who you are, what you're supposed to think, then they control. When I say people, I'm not just being loose with it. I'm talking about media. I'm talking about policy-driven decisions. And if that informs who you are more than your reality, then we're missing it. I really think we're missing it. And so I would say that to demonize a whole country and to continue to wage a campaign, a budget item, which is within our US government, to wage a propaganda machine against Cuba is waging a war against our own sense of what it means to be who we are. That's what Truth and Reconciliation is all about. How much misinformation does it take for you to unsee what you saw or to unknow what you know? And I think that is a real calculation that is made at different levels of control and different levels of domination to make you take your experience and question it and to think that these thoughts, where are they coming from? And there's the poem that I mentioned earlier is that Why People Be Mad at Me Sometimes by Lucille Clifton. It's that they want me to remember their memories, but I just keep going on remembering mine. And this is so important to hold on to our truth, our reference points, our history, because it is constantly under attack. That's why education is not just a word that just is out there. No, it's actually when we tell the truth and when we actually tell the truth in public and make a public witness of it so that we cannot continue to let lies just exist in society. We've experienced that too much. And so when we get to tell the truth, it means the power's back in our hands. There's been too much power in too few hands for far too long. And we need the power back in people's hands.
Amen. Amen. Couldn't have said better. No, I thank you.
Yeah, I only think I'll add to that, Wesley, that beautifully said. And I just wanted to say, in a very simply put, as we approach 1 million deaths from COVID and still have no relief for healthcare or our economic turmoil that we find ourselves in, we watch in the United States billionaires fly to space, make record amounts of wealth, and our people are consistently ignored by a government for the sake of profit. The contradiction is glaring. absolute crime against humanity.
Definitely, that sounds really good. Thank you. And Josh, I'll hand it to you for the wrap up. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And thank you, Wesley and Gail. Thank you so much to Beau, Salifu, to Shaquille for your contributions. And before we get out of here, I also want to take a moment to say thank you so much to the SBA Productions team. They're working so hard on the back end, making sure that the videos are popping up and that we've highlighted the way we are. And so I want to give a major shout out to all that invisible labor that's happening in the background to make this go as seamless as it is. Thanks and lots of love to you all. Just a couple of quick kind of recapping orientations type announcements. We know that, the April webinar, we're going to hear from Black Workers for Justice, but between now and then, we want y'all to join us next time. If you are tuned in to the live stream and you're not on the webinar, please go to our website to sign up for future webinars. That's www.southernvision.org. We'll drop the link into the chat, but also, again, say it, www.southernvision.org. Make sure you sign up to get the updates for the next webinar next month. We're asking you to send us, tweet at us on Southern Vision. We'll drop our comms folks will drop the Twitter link into the chat for everybody to kind of get caught up on. Please be on the lookout for future updates for the next IFCO Caravan. And before we move to the final close, I just want to give a quick, maybe 30 seconds to both Gail and Wesley to give whatever closing remarks that they may want to give.
Yeah, no, well, I just want to thank you. I want to thank the entire team there at Southern Vision Alliance. This has really been a wonderful friendship and partnership that we're establishing. I had an opportunity to meet many of the members during the caravan, and looking forward to continuing to find ways that we can do this kind of collaborating. Wesley Morris, it's always an honor, and I really do. I learn every time you speak, my brother. I really appreciate you, and it's been a great pleasure to do this together. And lastly, yeah, I'm just hoping that we can continue to encourage people to go to Cuba. The information was up on the screen about how you can reach out to us for the caravan, no matter how you do it. I think having that experience is good and positive, and how we bring it home and connect the experiences to what we need to be doing here in our home communities. So thank you. Thanks for this. And I'll be following. I'm honored to be on your inaugural webinar, but we'll be following up future webinars as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Gail and IFCO. Seriously, continue to be an inspiration to me. Thank you for everyone that is on this call. Much love. Thank you to Josh for moderation, Manzoor and Beau, Salifu, Shaquille, and all the questions and all the responses. None of this is taken for granted. This is building towards somewhere. We have a vision. And as long as you have a vision, you have a way forward and you have a reason to keep going. And so I want to shout out to all the Black farmers fighting for reparations from the US government and the United States Department of Agriculture that is in the system now. Also, much love to my beloved Community Center family. A launch of a statewide truth and justice and reconciliation process just happened today. And lastly, Faith Community Church and Venceremos Brigade, and of course, Southern Vision Alliance, another organizing home and hub where I come to you from today. And I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't encourage everybody to give yourself un abrazo fuerte. Give yourself a big hug, lots of love. I don't know, it's a wet and rainy day over here, so give yourself some love. Appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Wesley and Gail and everybody who's helped to make this inaugural webinar an amazing webinar. There is a relief when we get a chance as people in our struggle to fellowship. And that's what we did here today. And so through this fellowship, we affirm our solidarity with all oppressed people around the world. And it's with that vein that we want to say thank you for all of you for taking the time out in a Thursday afternoon to join this discussion. And we look forward to continuing a very similar strain of conversations for this whole year as we unpack and respond to and envision our liberation going forward. If you've enjoyed this podcast and webinar, if you've enjoyed your time here today and you have the means, please feel free to give a small donation to Southern Vision Alliance to help us continue to do these kinds of podcasts and webinars. But beyond that, we want to say thank you all for so much for your time and for your effort and taking the moment to kind of join this conversation. And with that, we want to say love is love, and we appreciate you all. And cheers to a Southern Vision. Peace.